this data tools next for the information of the third generation students. It's conducted every year. So basically this year is for the second generation students. So next year we will still be doing this, so you can actually attend next year. So maybe some of you are not available during this time, but we prioritize the schedules of the second generation and the first generation students. So that's why maybe some third generation are not here, because of the fact that they're not really available during this time. But since you're here, so at least you won't have to attend it next year.
If I attend this one, can I skip the next one?
Yes, definitely. Maybe Joe will be the sensei next session. So, hi. Okay, so for today's session, it's called Data Tools Next. We're going to have a sensing case study. So basically, we're going to be doing an Android GPS tracking application. So it's divided into two sessions, session 1 and session 2. Session 1 is today until 4:30, hopefully. And session 2 will be conducted next Wednesday at the same time. So for session 1, this is the overview first. What are we going to be doing for this DTN? And I think maybe the second generation students need some review on Android programming and SQL review. And I have the third generation students who I know took it last in March. So maybe you guys can help out the second generation students in terms of refreshing their memory about these two programming languages. And of course, we will be doing some exercises. So this will be the content for session 2. So system design and functionality, Android application overview and configuration, and a little bit of review about the Java programming language, and of course the application itself. So if we finish early session 1, the contents for session 1 today, we'll move on to the topics that will be covered for session 2, so that in session 2 you will have more time in debugging your application and trying out the mobile application outside or anywhere in university. So the overview of the system. So our system will consist of a client and a server. So our client will be an Android application which will be used to obtain your mobile device coordinates, the latitude and longitude through the global positioning system. And then the mobile device or the application will send your device's location to a server. And in our server, we have a Java application that stores the coordinates in a database. So now you know why we need to review on the Android programming language and the SQL programming and a little bit of the Java application, because we will be using all these programming languages for this session. So this is the workflow of the system. So I've mentioned before. So you will have your mobile, your Android phones, Android tablets, and you will request and receive coordinates through the GPS, and using your application called the data sender, it will establish a connection with the server wherein we use using the SSH tunnel, wherein in the server, like the Java application post store is running, and we use this to store the coordinates of your mobile device in the database. So first, Android programming review. So in my previous lectures in DTF, I think these are the concepts that we tackled. So first, what is Android, history, versions, architecture, and a little bit of the fundamentals like the app workflow, the different components, and the intents and filters. What are their uses? So why develop for Android? Let me ask. Hyuntae, do you remember? Like there were, I think, 3 reasons that I shared for the last during the DTF. Do you remember any of those? No?
Maybe because open source.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. What else? Yes. Okay. One of the reasons is like since it's open source, many people are developing Android applications. So it has the biggest market share, and in 2014 it has taken the lead for app downloads, and also it has a wide range of Android devices. So it makes it more flexible for developers. So this is a little bit of history. You can just read through the slides. And I think the important one is it was released in 2007, wherein the Android Beta SDK was released first. And I think when we had with the second generation students, when we had our lecture, I think it was Lollipop at that time. Now we have a new version, the Marshmallow, which was released in 2015. And this is the architecture of Android. So there are like 4 layers. The bottom layer is the Linux kernel. You have also your libraries. You have your application framework, wherein you will be using this libraries in the application framework to develop your applications, which is on the top layer. Okay. Next is the app workflow. So first, setup. So we need to set up your development environment. So you install the software development kit. You might install your IDE. So for this session, we will be using the Android Studio. And then you need to set up your AVDs or Android virtual devices and your hardware devices for testing. So even if you don't have a mobile device, you can still test your application using the virtual devices that comes with your SDK. And of course, the actual development wherein you create your application. So you create an Android project with source code, and then you build and run your application and test if it does what you want it to do. You debug your application, you test your application, and then when it's ready, you prepare your application for release. And if you want to earn money, you release your application. Okay, so first, let's try to create an Android project. So please open up Android Studio and try to create a new project. So you can name it using any file name. Okay. I'll be going around, and if you have any questions, just let me know. So create an Android project and run this project on your device. Okay. Once you created a new project, just connect your mobile device and run it on your tablet and see like what it displays. Problems with their devices. So let's figure that out later, and let's move on to the next section. So in relation to the next session, we want to create a simple user interface. Okay, for your application. So what you can do is you can go to the file menu and then click on new, choose XML, and then choose layout XML file. And you can use this file name for now, send timer setting.xml. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. So file. Hold on. File new. Oh, I also have the same error. Okay, I'll figure that out later. Okay, new. Where's that? Is it different? Is it okay? So you have this left. How to say? On the left side, you have like a project directory, something like this. Okay, so your Java is where all your Java source files are gonna be. So as you know, you have like your main activity class, and another folder is the rest folder. So it's your resources folder. You have your layouts, your menu, your values. These are like your drawables, which are like your icons that you're gonna use. So go to layout, and then right click on that, and then you can see new layout resource file, or you can just go to XML and then layout XML file. Okay, and then let's see, send timer setting, and choose for now a linear layout, and then finish. So this is what you're gonna have. So you have a design tab and a text tab. So okay. So are you guys done? Are you in this section already? Okay. Everyone was able to create an XML. The user interface, let's try to look into this figure. So basically, the graphical user interface for an Android is built using a hierarchy of view and view group objects. So view objects are usually user interface elements like buttons, text fields, text, edit text. And view group objects are invisible view containers that define how the child views are laid out. So basically, from the word itself, view group is just an object that contains a lot of view objects. Okay, so let's see in this particular example. So I think this is similar to what you have there in the design tab, right? So you have a view group and view objects. Can you give me an example of a view object in this particular example? View object. Give me an example. Joe? Again? Yeah, what example of a view object? For example, a button, a text view. Okay, so in this particular example, one view object is a text view. This create new account text. That's a view object. Another is, Dongjin? A DJ? Yeah. Yeah. What is it called? What is the name of the view object? It's an edit text. Okay. So this one is a text view. This one is an edit text, meaning you can type in a text or enter a text. And then another view object is the button, right? Cancel button and next button. So as you can see, these view objects are part of a view group object. So in this particular case, these view objects are part of the view group object, the relative layout. So if you check the text tab, there is a linear layout object. So linear layout is your root view group object. So in this particular case, that view group is linear layout. So let us convert this particular user interface to this, that hierarchy, okay? So at the top will be the view group, right? It's a view group. And what is this? What is the top view group object in this particular example? Any ideas? Hongjin? Yeah. So it's a relative layout. And then under it are what? Can you give me an example? Hyuntae? Which one? A table layout?
Yes.
Okay. So another view group, right? Which is a table layout. So under the table layout, Hyuntae, what is in it? Okay, those are views, which are text view, what else? And edit text. And others. And under the view group relative layout, there's another one, right? It has also a view, which is a text view. What else? And another one? Picture. There's no picture. Another one? Any ideas? There's another under the view group. Yes, you're right. So another view group, which is a linear layout. And inside this view group, there are two views, right? So it's like the button and another button. So basically, the UI is just illustrated that way or created that way. So if we want to design, let's say, a text view, so we just basically drag and drop it. And then in the text tab, you will see that it's created for you. Or another is you can just create your own from here. Let's say an edit text. It will have a layout width and a layout height. So let's say, what are the fields and wrap? So this match parent, how do you say? The meaning is the same as the word. It will just match the size of the parent. So in this particular example, let's say you have a text view. If you set your width to match the parent, it will match the width of the view group, the table layout. But if you set it to wrap content, the size of that user or element will just be depending on the content. Let's say you have a button wherein the name is OK. So basically, if you set the width to be wrap content, your button will just exactly match your text OK. But if you want to match it with the parent, then it depends on like the screen, right? So it can have a width as big as this. So something like that. Okay, so moving on from the exercise, I want you to add a vertical orientation to the linear layout. The linear layout here is the parent, your parent node, right? Or your parent view group. So, in this case, you want to add it here. Android orientation. Then vertical. Okay. So can you do that? So after adding the orientation, add a plain text view widget to your XML file. So I think I showed that to you a while ago. So you can use either the design tab or you can use the text tab. And rename the ID to this particular ID. Maybe you can do this something. And if you want to add the ID field, then just add that. ID. And okay. So I think I mentioned the use of layout width and layout height. So another important field is the Android ID. So each particular element in your user interface is ideal to have an ID so that you can reference this element in your source code. So for example, if we want to reference this edit text from your source code, let's say from main activity, let's just an example, okay? Let's say edit text. So basically, this edit text references or points to the edit text that you have in your send timer setting, for example, this one. So that's how you point to the user interface elements in your XML file from your Java source code. Okay, we'll go through this later on. So please try this by yourself. Okay. So after adding an orientation to your linear layout file, after adding a plain text view widget, and after adding a number decimal text field, define the layout of your text field, number decimal, to layout width as match parent and layout height as wrap content. And then I'll be going around to check. Okay. Done?
What? Just...
And fourth is broadcast receivers, wherein it responds to system messages. So we'll go through each of these components in the next slides. So first, activity. An activity is a single screen with a user interface, or it's a screen that can be divided into multiple screen areas called fragments. So an example might be wherein you have an email app, and then you have an activity that just views your emails, another activity that composes your emails, and another activity that reads your emails. And these activities are actually independent of each other. What I mean is that there can be another application aside from your email app that will use these activities. Let's say, for example, you have an application, you have a camera application, and you want it to access your compose email activity such that when a user takes a picture, it will automatically share this picture using through email. So you could do that with activities. And you implement it as a subclass of the activity object. I think in your project, you already have this. You have a main activity, and then it is implemented as a subclass of activity. So you could check it out. And I think I've mentioned also that this is the life cycle of an activity. So all your applications, activities, movement is based on this life cycle. So there are only 3 states wherein it's static, meaning that the activity is in that state for quite a period of time. So the resume state, the pause state, and the stop state. So when you run your application, and when you start interacting with your application, you are in the resumed state already. And after that, sometimes when you click on a certain button, a dialog screen appears, right? So, and you need user confirmation. So the previous activity will actually be in the pause state, meaning it's just partially invisible or partially visible to the user. And it will only go back to the resume state once you interact with it. Let's say, for example, you have a dialogue and it needs user confirmation. Usually, most dialogues are only, it just takes half of your screen, right? So your previous activity is still there. But you need to interact with the dialogue first before you go back or before you're able to interact with your previous activity. So that's what you call a pause state. But sometimes when you call another activity, the entire activity fills the whole screen. So your previous activity is in the stop state. It's in hidden state. So from this state, it's either you go back to your previous activity or you end the previous activity, which is destroyed. When you start your application, this is where you enter. And your application won't stay in these states for a long time. It will, let's say, after created state, it will go to the next state immediately until the resume state where you start interacting with your application. This is actually very important whenever you're creating your application. Let's say, for example, you don't want to use your GPS resources when you are waiting for user confirmation, right? So on pause state, you have to disconnect your GPS, for example. But if you need your GPS for your previous activity, then you have to start it again in the unstarted state, right? So this life cycle is very important on which areas, on which states you start or end your services, so that in terms of resources, you're able to minimize its consumption. So second is the services. A service is a component that runs in the background to perform a long-running operation without the need of a user interface. So another component can start it or let it run and bind to it in order to interact with it. A good example is playing music in the background. So sometimes we use a service so that the user is able to play music in the background while using a different app. So that's a particular example of a service. So you can implement this as a subclass of the service object. So this is the life cycle. So it's the same as the activity life cycle, such that you start your service using start service and bind service, and then you end your service on destroy. So third component is the content provider. So content provider manages a set of app data. So it allows you to query and modify data stored in your storage system. So this storage system can be your mobile phone's file system, an SQL database, or even a server. So for example, of a content provider is that an app that is able to access your contact data stored in your device. Okay. and you implement it as a subclass of the content provider object. Okay. Last component is a broadcast receiver. So it's a component that responds to system-wide broadcast announcements. So it does not have a user interface like an activity, but it may use status bar notifications to alert the user of a certain event. So for example, when your battery is low, you could receive a notification, or a screen is turned off, or a picture is captured. So it's implemented as a subclass of the broadcast receiver object. Okay. So with these components, let's see more on like how these components may interact with each other. For example, if you have an Android system and then you launch a certain application, let's say Android application A with main activity and a service. So from the main activity, you could start another activity, a secondary activity, or it could search and update, let's say, your contacts data using a content provider. So that's your application A. And an activity from your application A can start another application B. It's application B's main activity, wherein this particular application can start or search for an Android application C that starts another activity. Or your system can also send broadcast events wherein another application is just listening to this broadcast, and it waits and responds to the events, and it will start a service based on this broadcast. For example, if the battery is low, you might have an application that will respond wherein it will turn off your GPS, or I don't know, turn off all the unnecessary services. So that can be an application and something like that. So I've mentioned before that in order for an activity to communicate with a service or a broadcast receiver, it uses an inter-messaging communication or inter-application communication, and we call it an intent. So an intent is a messaging object you can use to request an action from another app component. So basically, it's a communication device, or a communication, approach between activity services, activities, and broadcast receivers. So how does it do this? So for example, if you want to launch a new activity, so you could use start activity with an intent. And if you want to initiate a service, you could use start service with the intent inside. And if you want to deliver the message to some broadcast receivers, you use send broadcast with the intent as a field. Okay. So there are different intents that you give out, right? For example, it's like a person communicating with another person. There are a lot of messages that's being passed. But we need an intent filter so that we know who will receive these messages. So that's what an intent filter is for. So there are two intents, explicit intent and implicit intents. Explicit intent is that you know the target of your intent. So let's say, for example, you want activity 2 or something. And another is you don't have a target, but it's just used to activate a component in other applications. For example, you just want to view this particular web page, but you don't really have a target application that has to open this particular page. So that's an implicit intent. Okay. So let's maybe you can you can understand better if we do an exercise about it. So in your created project, I want you to create a secondary activity and call it from the main activity by clicking a button. Okay. First, create a new activity. So you can create a new activity using the File menu. So let's do this together. So maybe from here. this one. Maybe a blank activity, okay? Hi. So from in your Java folder, you are able to see the two activities, right? The main activity and your secondary activity. Second, add a new button widget to activity main XML. I think in the previous exercise, we talked about adding user interface elements. So just go to the layout folder and look for an activity, your XML file for your main activity, and add a button widget. Okay. So if I'm gonna do it from here, so just go to, this is your main activity, right? So look for the XML file of your main activity. So you will know by this. This is the file name of the layout file of this particular activity. Activity main. So I go to activity main, and you can either use the design tab, or you could use the text tab to add your button. So since I'm a little bit lazy, I just drag it here and here, and it will be here. Okay. So I mentioned before that you can set the ID or name your button. So let's say, for example, the ID for the newly created button is this name, button. So I can use it from here. So I have to declare my button, and then, hold on. So after adding a new button widget to my XML file, I want to define my button in main activity. After defining my new button, I have to add a click event listener and handler to the button. I mentioned here that I want to call my secondary activity by clicking on a button, right? So basically, you can add a click event listener. So every time that button is clicked, this particular method is called. So you also have to somehow code a certain, or like a handler on every time this event is called. So we can do this from here. So let's say I already defined my button here, and then okay. So there, I've defined my button, and then after I want to add an event listener. So every time this button is clicked, I want to do something about it. So button that set, there we go. Set on click listener, and then what is this? Hi. So sometimes the IDE will be able to recommend what methods or functions you have to add for this particular event. So for this particular event, we need a handler wherein like what to do during on-click. So what I want to do is to call my secondary activity, right? And to do this, you can use an intent. So maybe I could put my intent here. And Alt enter. There. So basically what I did is create a secondary activity, main2 activity, and then with a click of this button, it will start the second activity. Okay. So please try running it. And with that, that concludes our first, the Android programming review. So you have until, you'll start the second half at around 3 p.m. So if you're done, you can take a break.
Could you make fonts bigger?
Yes, yeah, I'm about to do that. So is everyone clear in this part? Who were able to do it? Run it in their mobile device. 4. Ban? No? Not yet? Yes, yeah? Not yet. Is everyone, it's okay? So at least try to copy this source file, and then maybe after the SQL session, we'll go through it again. Okay. Okay. Everyone done copying this statements? Okay. Everyone done? Okay. You?
Okay.
Hi. Okay, so I hope that you at least have an idea on like how to create a user interface and somehow call a particular function with a click, or call a function by interacting with different user interface elements. So the next session is an SQL review. I think you already have gone through this, the previous data tools first. So these are the contents for this review. So what is a database, some concepts of DBMS, how to connect to the server, and the different fundamentals. So what is a database? So basically a database is just an organized collection of data, right? So it could be as simple as a text file with like different values. So let's say you have a notepad text file. So a very basic or simple database file would just be like one and then your name, say my name, and then female. And then another one would be, and so on and so forth, right? So that's a very simple text file. Or you could also have like a spreadsheet, an Excel file, and then you have different values per row. So that's another example of a database. And more complex than that is when you use a relational database management system wherein you have like huge amounts of data. So why is it important? So it is important because we have a lot of data nowadays, and usually it's organized into a collection. So we use a database in data analysis. And some examples is, for example, detecting a disease from several factors or symptoms, invest in a marketing campaign, build a predictive model for unemployment, using data to train neural networks. So those are just some basic examples on why it is important to somehow have an idea on how to query a database. So when we have a huge amount of data, we usually use a database management system for our data. So basically, it's a software program that enables the creation and management of databases. So generally, these databases will be more complex than your regular text file in a spreadsheet or in a notepad. So in fact, most of today's systems are referred to as relational database, meaning they have the ability to store and related data across multiple tables. So examples are the following: MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, and Oracle. So with a database management system, many tasks can be done either via programmatically or using a user interface. So we use a structured query language or SQL to perform database tasks. So in this particular session, we will just try to refresh your memory on how to use SQL to modify data in a database. So first, I gave you like a password, a username and a password. So I want you to connect to the db2.ertl.jp server. So I think for the second generation student, I don't know, what did you use to connect before? PuTTY? No? Term? No. Okay. Anyway, so in your laptop, maybe you can find Term. And then the first screen, please type in db2.ertl.jp and then connect via SSH. And then when you press OK, the username and password screen will open, and please type in your username and password. Terra Terminal, I think that's why it's Terra Terminal. Okay. So everyone's connected? Okay. So I want you to connect to MySQL. So type in MySQL-u and then your username written on the paper, and then -p. And just so you know, to disconnect, this is also what you're going to type. Quit or /q. Okay. So for now, type in this. Finished? Done? Are you able to start MySQL? Next, create a database. So with the database name. So for the database name, please use your username. So create database x09 something. Okay. So to set a target base, you use the keyword use, and to delete an existing database, you use drop database and the database name. Okay? So just do this. Create database. Done? Okay. So let us move on. So in database terms, usually a table is responsible for storing data in the database. So database tables consist of rows and columns. And a row contains each record, and in the table and the column is responsible for defining the type of data that goes into each cell. For example, this is a row, this is one record, and this is the column. As you can see, they have the same data type, right? So let's say for book ID, it's just numbers and characters. This one is all letters, and this one is like an integer. And here we have a decimal. So in creating a table, first you select the database to use. So you use the keyword use and the database that you created. And in order to create a table in the database, you use create table and the table name. And you also specify the name of the columns. So for example, here the name of the column is title, author name, page count, price, quantity. And you also specify the data type for each column. And in order to check the table properties, you use the keyword DESC. Okay. And in order to add data, you use the insert statement. So insert into the table name, which is, like for example, book, a bookstore or something. And the values, this one is the values for the record. For example here, insert into bookstore values this, this, and this. So one of the things that makes databases very important is a query. So a query refers to the action of retrieving data from a database. But sometimes you don't want to select all the information inside the database, right? You just want to select a few records. So you use the select statement. So in the first query, you select or retrieve all the data in your bookstore table. Here in the second query, you only retrieve the records which has the column value of Sam Taylor. And this one is when only those values with quantity greater than 35. So next, each record in the database has a unique identifier, and a unique identifier is a value that is unique to each record. And the column that contains the unique identifier is called the primary key. So sometimes you have a composite key wherein you have two columns that will serve as your primary key. So this is also possible. Okay, so for your exercise, I want you to create this table in your database. The table name is bookstore with the following information. So you have five records with column names, book ID, title, author name, page count, price, and quantity. So I give it to you to think about what will be the data type for each column. Okay, if it will be an integer, a decimal, a character. So I leave it up to you to determine like what will be the data type for each column. Okay. So maybe for page count and quantity, maybe an integer. And for price, maybe a decimal. So yeah, and please set the book ID as the primary key. Okay. So I think you can do that in 5 minutes. Hi. So I think you are not able to create a database, but you already, please use, you can show the database that's already available in your account by this particular command, show databases, and then just use the database that's available there for you to create a table. Okay. Okay, so let's continue with that. At least you already have an idea of how you're gonna do it later on, right? Okay. So next are constraints. So we need constraints to be able to guarantee that the database is valid and also to specify rules for the data in a table. So for example, we have the primary key, the foreign key, the not null constraint, meaning that no values in that particular column will have a null, and a unique constraint wherein all the values in that particular column is unique. Okay, so those are just examples of constraints. So you can search for it in Google to be able to know more constraint values for your database. Second is normalization. So sometimes there is redundancy in creating your database, so we have to be able to manage your database efficiently. So for this session, we'll focus on first normal form, second normal form, and third normal form. So first is the first normal form. So our relation is in first normal form if the domain of each attribute contains only atomic values, and the value of each attribute contains only a single value from that domain. So this particular table is not in first normal form because, as you can see, it has values that are not, that are multiple. So in order to change this particular table to first normal form, we separate this particular this particular record into two records. Okay, so you have A5 and then another record B5. So this particular table is in first normal form. Second normal form is a table is in second normal form if it is in first normal form, meaning all the values or all the attributes are atomic. And no non-prime attribute is dependent on the proper subset of any candidate key of the table. So first, what is an attribute? What do we mean by a non-prime attribute? So a non-prime attribute is an attribute that is not part of any candidate key. So in this particular table, the candidate keys are the client ID and the product ID. So this table is in 1H first normal form because each attribute has only atomic values, right? However, it's not in 2NF because the non-prime attribute, which is the product description, is, is dependent on the product ID alone and not on the client ID. So we could actually convert this to second normal form by having these two tables. One table with the product ID and the product description, and one table with the client ID and the product ID. Okay. Second is the third normal form. So a table is in third normal form if it is in the second normal form and all the attributes of the table columns are dependent on the primary key only. Okay, so here the candidate key is the product ID. And category here is dependent only on the category ID. So we could actually convert this table into third normal form by separating the category and the category ID columns, right? So somehow this manipulation or normalization is able to minimize redundancies in your database tables for it to be more efficient. So please read about more of this at a later time. So for now, let's focus on some exercises. So for those who did not finish the first exercise, try to continue in that one. And plus this tables. So create these 2 additional tables. And now I've specified what column type to use. So for table name level, you have 2 columns, level ID and level description. And for level ID, use the int data type. And for the description, you use the varchar data type. And same with book level. Okay. So after creating these 2 tables, try adding a foreign key to an existing table. So alter table, your table name, and add foreign key, your column name, and references table name, and column name too. So for example, you can use this particular example. Alter the table book level wherein you add the foreign key, the book ID, which references to bookstore, the book ID in bookstore. And you can also add a foreign key level ID that references to level ID in level. Okay. First, create these 2 tables plus the bookstore table that was discussed in the previous exercise, and try to add this one. Okay. And from that, try to query your tables. So you can actually combine multiple tables using foreign keys. So you can select from both tables where the column 1 of table 1 is equal to column 2 of table 2. Like, for example, this. Okay, try this query after doing this exercise. So from this particular slide, that ends our session 1. So if we still have time, I'm going to proceed with some slides for session 2. Okay. Okay. Okay, it's just some changes. What? Yeah. In this particular slide, no. Try to do it separately. To those people who had an error in Android Studio a while ago, and the solution for it is try to download the latest SDK. So go to the SDK manager. So you can access it using this button, or you can access it using Tools, Android, and SDK Manager. And then you have to go to Android SDK and you have to click on API 23. And then once you click, try to apply and install that particular version. I think that will solve the errors that regarding the resources and the styles. I think that will be able to solve that error. So basically it will look like this, and then you just have to click on 5.x and then apply. Okay. So if you have any more questions regarding today's session, we can just use Slack to discuss about it ever. So once you're done with the exercise, I think we'll just continue with session 2 next week. Okay. I just hope that maybe you will be able to read some of the slides so that it will be faster for us to go through next session.